Vladimir Putin thought he could easily conquer Ukraine. He launched heavy attacks on power plants, infrastructure facilities, and civilian targets in Kiev, Lviv, and Kharkiv. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian citizens were left in the dark, but he failed to intimidate them. Despite power outages, Kiev residents are undeterred and are organizing picnics in the cold weather. Despite all the challenges, they are defying Putin. Russia couldn't break them, and karma, like a boomerang, came back to hit Russia. Ukraine's revenge was instant and devastating. The Russian geography stretching from Moscow to Oryol, from Belgorod to Saratov and Ingles on the Volga line, and from there to Krasnodar, was gradually engulfed in a ring of fire. Hundreds of thousands of Russians were instantly plunged into cold and darkness. Power outages brought social services in Russia to a standstill. The country was plunged into chaos. To understand the audacity of this operation, we must first look at the top of the map at Moscow, the heart of Russian power. The Russian Ministry of Defense had deployed Pantsir systems, S-400 batteries, and electronic warfare shields around the capital. Moscow was claimed to be an impregnable fortress. However, Ukrainian intelligence demolished this claim with a single midnight operation. The target was the strategic city of Kran-Zavodsk in the Moscow Oblast. This is no ordinary suburb, it is a critical junction in the capital's industrial and energy supply chain. Footage from the area proved that a transformer station had been completely devastated by sabotage or a drone strike. Russian officials clung to the usual lie about falling debris. However, successive explosion sounds from the Serpukhov region scream that this was not an isolated accident, but a coordinated attack aimed at breaking Moscow's energy ring. I hope we don't get here, we won't get look at those explosions there. However, Ukraine combined the shock in Moscow with destruction in the provinces. Let's move a little south on the map. Oryol, here the Oryol thermal power plant was targeted. Images published on social media show the strike on the plant's main turbine building or switchyard in all its brutality. The smoke in Oryol does not just mean a power outage. This plant kept the region's industrial production afloat. The fact that drones were able to penetrate so deeply right into the heart of Oryol and strike the plant with pinpoint accuracy is proof that Russian air defenses are completely porous. Throughout the night, residents of Saratov and Ingles were awakened by the sound of engines tearing through the sky, followed by explosions. Airports in Saratov and Penza were immediately closed. Flights were suspended and the sky was closed to civilian traffic. Ingles in particular is of critical importance because it is the base for Russia's strategic bombers. The fact that Ukrainian drones penetrated the air defense shield here and infiltrated the city shows that even the Russian army's most valuable assets are now trapped. And the weakest, most tragic link in the chain, Krasnodar and Apsky. This is where the war turned from tragedy to disgrace. As Ukrainian drones approached the area, Russian air defense batteries panicked. Video evidence in our possession shows an S-300 missile fired by the Russian army, veering off course and striking a civilian home in Apsky directly. The images are horrific. A house's roof is blown up by the very army that was supposed to protect it. From another angle, we see the house engulfed in flames and the helpless civilians. This is no accident. It is a deadly combination of lack of training, panic, and outdated technology. While trying to stop Ukraine, Russia is bombing its own people. The same chaos unfolded in Belgorod. The Maitrinskaya hydroelectric power plant and its surroundings were pounded by missiles while air defenses proved inadequate. Ukraine also struck another blow to the Russian army's logistical lifeline, Yek. This city on the coast of the Sea of Azov with its strategic air base and military port is the most vital organ feeding Russia's southern front. The attack here was so effective that local sources and leaked reports confirm that exactly 80 people military personnel and air base housing were trapped in pitch darkness within seconds. Consider this, 80,000 people. This is equivalent to shutting down an entire mid-sized European city. The blowing up of the transformer station in Yeysk not only affected civilians but also shut down the air base's radar systems, fuel pumps and ammunition loading cranes. The Russian National Guard, while trying to protect Moscow, had left Yeysk, its rear gate, completely defenseless. And the wave of attacks did not stop there. Ukraine had laid out Russia's energy map like a surgeon on the table and marked its weakest points in occupied Malit. That vertical beam of light cutting through the sky like a laser was visual proof that the 330 kilovolt main transmission line feeding the Russian occupation forces had been severed. This chain of attacks created an irreparable psychological and structural fracture on Russia's home front. Its effects go much deeper than a defeat on the battlefield, reaching into the collective subconscious. The first and most devastating effect is state terror and security failure. While Kiev Mayor Vitaly Klitschko restored heating to 6.0 homes despite Russian attacks, Putin's inability to extinguish fires right next to his own capital is having a devastating effect on the Russian people. That house hit by its own army in Krasnodar is a turning point for the Russian people. Until now, Putin's deal was obey me and I will protect you from Ukraine. The images from Afipsky tore up that deal. Russian citizens are now asking who will kill me. A Ukrainian drone or our own panicked S-300. When air defense sirens sound, people rush to shelters, no longer fearing the enemy but their own protectors. This is the beginning of the end for a regime. The second impact is industrial and energy blindness. Russia is a country that experiences temperatures of -20 to -30 degrees in winter. In such a climate, a power outage does not just mean darkness, it is a freeze order. When the power goes out, the circulation pumps of the central heating systems stop. The flow of hot water in the pipes is cut off. And within just hours, that water freezes, expands, and bursts the pipes from the inside. This scenario is currently unfolding in Russia's interior regions, not because of an attack but due to neglect. In Irkutsk, we see transformers exploding due to freezing, and people starting to freeze in their homes. In the Komi Republic, power lines are collapsing due to decay. Ukraine's attacks are accelerating this natural decay. Repairing the burst pipes in Yeysk or the Moscow suburbs will take months even after the war. The plumbing inside the walls will have to be completely replaced. This is an unpredictable war compensation of billions of rubles for the Russian economy. Ukraine is punishing Russia not just for today but for the next decade. The strike on the Oral thermal power plant has crippled the industrial belt south of Moscow. These power plants do not just heat homes. They supply factories that produce steel, spare parts, and ammunition for the Russian army. When the power plant is hit, the furnaces cool down and the production lines stop. Combined with the attack on Mitrin Sky in Belgorod, this creates an energy embolism in Russian military logistics. Modern factories, CNC machines, and production lines require uninterrupted high-quality energy. Even a sudden drop in voltage can damage precision manufacturing equipment. Moreover, an energy outage in winter means the factory's heating systems also shut down. The third effect is air defense saturation and matting. The accident in radar proves how tired and overloaded Russian air defense systems are. Operators are tired, systems are old, software is faulty. Ukraine is saturating Russian radar systems by sending large numbers of cheap drones, forcing them into error. The result: either the missiles fail to find their targets, as in Oral, and power plants are hit, or as in Krasnodar, the missiles miss their targets and hit civilian buildings. In both scenarios, Ukraine's strategy wins. The fourth effect is symmetric energy terror. Ukraine has created its own deterrent against Russia's nuclear blackmail. The message from Kiev is very clear: if you freeze our cities, we will burn your capital. This is the only language that will force Putin to the table. The language of power and destruction. Russia now has to think twice before attacking Ukraine's energy infrastructure because they are sitting in a glass house and Ukraine now has some very big stones in its hand. This entire chain of events leads us to a single strategic truth. Vladimir Putin has fallen into a deadly strategic checkmate position known as the Moscow dilemma. Russia's air defense resources are not unlimited. The number of S-300s, S-400s, and Pantsers is finite. These systems are currently being used intensively on the front line against Ukraine's ATACMS and F-16 threats. However, the war moving to Moscow is forcing the Kremlin into a terrible choice. The first option is to withdraw air defense systems from the front line to protect Moscow, St. Petersburg, and critical centers like Yekay. This is military suicide. Russian forces on the Donbass and Zaporizhia fronts would be completely exposed to Ukrainian artillery and aviation without an air umbrella. The balance on the front could collapse in favor of Ukraine within hours. The second option is to keep the systems in place on the front lines and watch as Moscow and Russian cities are systematically struck by Ukrainian drones plunged into darkness. This is political suicide. The authority of a leader who cannot protect his own capital, who leaves his people in the cold and dark, cannot survive in any dictatorship. The sabotage in Bryansk is the most concrete evidence that control has been lost. For the Russian economy, this situation is an even heavier blow than the sanctions. The gas turbines, control systems, and high-voltage transformers needed to repair thermal power plants such as Mikarinskaya are no longer produced in Russia. These were technologies from Western giants like Siemens and General Electric. Now those parts are gone. Russia will not be able to repair these facilities. They will try to keep the system running with patches and low-quality spare parts from China. But this will pave the way for the system to collapse in an even greater catastrophe. The current financial environment is tightening the constraints on the Kremlin day by day. Oil and natural gas revenues are not just an item in the Russian federal budget. They are a matter of structural survival. According to Reuters' latest reports in January 2026, oil and natural gas taxes continue to account for about a quarter of federal budget revenues. This is the main artery feeding Russia's war machine. However, this artery is now under pressure from two sides. On the one hand, global crude oil prices showed an unexpected and sharp decline in 2025. This drop radically squeezed the profits Russia would earn, even if it continued to physically sell oil. This is precisely where the physical attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure come into play. These attacks paralyze Russia's financial planning by creating volatility in the markets. Already struggling with low prices, revenue streams are now compounded by massive operational losses and mounting defense expenditures. The destruction of a power plant in Oral or a transformer in Yask is not merely a repair cost. It means halting production in that region and consequently the state's inability to collect taxes. When the rear becomes a combat zone, Russia's operation loses a key advantage: the ability to separate frontline war consumption from domestic revenue generation and normalization. Ukraine's goal does not have to be complete closure. A more achievable outcome is a permanent insecurity that forces Russia to defend more territory, protect more infrastructure, and spend more to keep systems operational. At this point, the pace of the war slips out of Moscow's control and enters a cycle of forced intervention. Vladimir Putin wanted to use winter as a weapon. He planned to crack the cold like a whip over the Ukrainian people, but the wind has turned. Now that whip is cracking back on Russia's own face. The smoke rising in Moscow's suburbs, the 80 people plunged into darkness and ick. And that electric arc in the skies over Mariupol herald the war's new and ruthless face. Ukraine is fighting Russia not only with its soldiers but also with its darkness, and the Kremlin's options are running out. Will they sacrifice the front lines to keep the lights on, or surrender Russia to darkness to hold the front? Only one thing is certain right now. This winter will be very long, very cold, and very dark for Russia because the war is no longer on television screens. The war is now in Russia's home, in the street lamps that won't go out and the radiators frozen solid. This is the darkness against darkness strategy, and it seems that Russia is about to lose its way in this darkness. So what do you think about this? Please share your thoughts in the comments.